7-year-old Bruce Farron, along with his aunt, uncle, and cousins, were headed for Pyramid Lake, where they planned to do some camping for a couple of days. After they arrived, they decided they would head down to the water to cool off. Bruce told his aunt and uncle that he needed to use the bathroom. And so his family got into the water, and Bruce walked over to a grove of trees and bushes. After a couple of minutes, Bruce did not come out of the wood line, and so his aunt and uncle started yelling for him. He didn't come out again, and so the uncle walked up and walked into the trees to go find his nephew, but he was not there. And so he yelled back for his wife and his kids to come help him look, and for the next hour they searched the entire area yelling for Bruce, but there was no sign of him, so they contacted the authorities. That day, a huge search was launched for Bruce, but nobody could find any trace of him. The following day at 4 p.m., Bruce had still not been located, and at this point his family is starting to lose hope. And it was around that time that a searcher who was several miles away from where Bruce had last been seen was walking up this very steep trail heading up towards this cliff. And the searcher knew there was no way a child could climb up it or down it, and so he was about to turn around and go search somewhere else when he happened to look up and he saw a child walking down the trail towards him, and the child was Bruce, and Bruce was totally fine, albeit a little bit hungry. All of these search and rescue models that predict where missing people will end up say that boys aged 7 to 9 will be found within a 7.2 mile radius 95% of the time, and that distance could be covered over a week's time. In order for Bruce to be found where he would have needed to cover 20 miles along a rugged ridgeline before scaling down that 500-foot cliff without the aid of climbing gear, and he did all that within 30 hours, a seemingly impossible task for a missing 7-year-old boy. When asked what happened, Bruce said he didn't remember. The only things he remembered were sleeping between 2 downed logs and drinking from a waterfall, and many animals, including one that was so close to him at night that it would jump over him. Bruce was followed up with as he got older, but he never could regain the memory of what actually happened to him. Some have speculated that Bruce might have been abducted when he went to the bathroom, and that's the only way he was able to cover that great of a distance in that amount of time, and that perhaps his abductor was one of these animals he saw at night. Barbara liked to hike a particular trail that brought her up to the Bear Creek overlook. Barbara offered to take her husband's cousin, Jim Rawmaker, hiking with her. At 1:30 that afternoon, Barbara's husband got a phone call from a police officer saying his wife was missing. And her husband just couldn't understand that. She had been with Jim, so where could she have gone? But the police officer didn't have a great answer, and he just told him, you should come down here and hear Jim's explanation about what happened. He and Barbara had made it up the trail successfully. They'd stayed up there for about 30 minutes. They had a picnic, and then at the end of it, they packed up, and Barbara began walking down the very well-marked trail, and she was about 20 feet ahead of him when he decided to turn around and take one more look at the beautiful view. And he said he was looking at the view for about 40 seconds before he turned back around and Barbara was gone. And he hadn't heard her call out for help. There was no sound of any struggle whatsoever. It was just complete eerie silence. As he took a few steps down the trail, he said he started looking around expecting to just see her, but she was nowhere. And as he walked, he noticed that the ground made a lot of noise, and he's thinking, how could she have gotten away from me without me hearing the sound of her footsteps? And then he also began looking around and realized the area they were in, it was well trafficked. You could actually see a pretty good distance in all directions. And so he's looking around thinking there's almost nowhere to hide. And so Jim started to feel scared and just began walking down the trail, expecting to run into her at any moment. But he didn't, and he kept turning around and looking behind trees and rocks. And so he made his way all the way down the trail, the whole time yelling for her, but never getting any feedback from her. And he got all the way to the parking lot, and he saw her car was still parked in the parking lot, and he noticed a crew was working in the road. And he went up to them and he asked if they had seen her or anybody come out of that trail, and they said no. And so Jim's starting to panic. He ran right back up the trail, all the way back up to the Bear Creek overlook, hoping that along the way he would see some indication of where she went. But again, there was nothing on the trail. He gets up to the overlook, he's looking around, he's yelling for her, nothing. And so he ran right back down again and he contacted authorities. Over the next 48 hours, a huge search was launched all around this area for Barbara. It included helicopters and huge search teams and highly trained sniffing dogs, but nothing nothing was found. There was no signs of foul play. There was no signs of an animal attack or some sort of abduction. There was nothing. Not even her scent was found, despite the fact that the dog's handlers knew exactly where her last position was. But none of the dogs picked it up, which is highly unusual. It really was like she had vanished into thin air. At first, Jim was obviously a suspect because he was the last person to see Barbara alive, but he never changed his story despite how far-fetched it seemed, and he was very cooperative and was very quick to offer to take a polygraph test, and so the police ruled him out as a suspect. And shortly after the search started, they shut it down because there was no sign of this woman anywhere. And so unfortunately, her family had to face the awful reality of getting zero closure. And unfortunately, to this day, we still don't know what happened because no trace of Barbara has ever been found. Just know that I really appreciate your support, and until next time, that's going to do it. See ya.